Hello, and welcome to this town hall on campus safety and policing on the University of Washington's Seattle campus. I'm Jack Martin, Interim Associate Vice President for Communications, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. We want to begin by acknowledging that we are on the land of the Coast Salish peoples, land which touches the shared waters of all the tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. Here to share how the university is approaching changes to policing and campus safety, and to answer your questions are President Ana Mari Cauce, Vice President for Student Life, Denzil Sweet, the UW Police Department reports to Dr. Sweet, and Gillian Wickwire, Manager of SafeCampus, the university's violence prevention and response program. Over the last week, members of the University of Washington community wrote in with questions related to Seattle campus safety. I'll ask those questions in a few moments, starting with those topics that the most people asked our panelists to address. You can also email questions during the broadcast to presofUW@uw.edu. A full recording of the town hall will be available later if you missed part of it. Before we get to your questions, each panelist will make short remarks to update the community on the work that has taken place so far and additional plans that are in the works. To begin, I'd like to introduce President Cauce.
Thank you so much, Jack, and thank you to those that are watching live right now and to those that will be watching later. I know that Friday can be a very busy time for people. The goals of this town hall are fairly straightforward. We want to provide you with an overview of what we've already done to improve our community safety, including how we're addressing calls from our communities of color in particular for changes to campus community. We also want to share with you what we're working on right now and what we'll continue to work on in the week and months ahead. We also very much want to seek your feedback and your ideas, both about what is planned and also ideas for directions for the future. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, and this is work that will evolve over time. There's no question that safety is our top priority. Safety for our students, for our faculty, staff, and for all those members of the community which visit our campus. And when I say safety, obviously I mean physical safety, but I also think it's important to recognize that it's also important to feel safe. We can't engage in the kinds of study, learning, and work. We can't be optimally productive if we don't feel safe. And we need to recognize that that feeling of safety can vary depending on your experiences and your background. For example, for some students, walking out of the library at night and seeing a police officer can make them feel safe. For others, it can actually be the opposite. In particular, police involvement and participation in the killings of Black men and women, including most recently that of Walter Wallace this week in Philadelphia, have left some members of our community, especially members of that are Black people in our community, Black students, faculty, and staff, feeling very unsafe in the presence of armed police officers. And that's something that we need to recognize. And again, even though we want to be careful about not saying that all police officers are the same, and I want to very much recognize some very good work that our own police officers, that members of UWPD have done to keep our campus safe, that we do have to recognize that no matter what profession we're in, that the actions of some members of our profession do end up reflecting on all of us. And we simply can't ignore the impact that police violence have had on perceptions of police officers if our goal is to be an inclusive campus. So again, our goal is to protect the safety and well-being of all members of our community. We do want to recognize again that UWPD has done a lot of good work to keep our campus safe. One thing that I want to clarify, because there is some confusion out there, is that I want to be clear that UWPD is our police force. They report directly to Denzil Sweet and up to me, and you'll hear from Denzil in just a moment, our Vice President of Student Life. And so in that sense, unlike some campuses where the bulk of their safety is done by police officers from the city or from the county, that is not the case for us. It is our own police officer, UWPD, that is responsible for safety on our campus. I also want to be clear that we have no contracts with the Seattle Police Department and that we have no intention in the foreseeable future of having any contracts with SPD for safety on our campus. If, I can't promise, forever and ever, but if there were ever the time that we would be considering having any kind of contracts with SPD, it wouldn't happen without a very full and robust campus consultation process. Again, I want to repeat, we currently have no contracts with SPD. We do have an agreement that allows us to take a lead and a supporting role in campus safety outside of our campus boundaries from north of 45th, where our UW students live, so that in north of 45th, which is officially part of the city and where officially SPD it would be the first responders, we do have an agreement where they allow us to, as much as possible, take the lead and support them in their work there. We also work closely with SPD in areas in the U District where our university has buildings, offices, and residence halls. But again, it's important to realize that those agreements are ones that allow UWPD to take a larger role rather than SPD. So it's very important to be clear that we don't have any contracts. We plan to have no contracts in the future. Some of the other things that we've done in response to the requests and demands from our BIPOC community, especially from our Black Student Union, is we've already reduced the number of armed officers in UWPD, and we plan to have at least a 20% reduction by the end of this fall as compared to our full complement in 2019. So we also have already set up, and Vice President Sweet will tell you more about it, a student advisory board to the UWPD. I think we're all in agreement that reducing the presence of armed police and focusing their time on those situations where armed officers are needed is our goal and is what we are aiming for in order to increase safety and to promote campus well-being across our campus. So again, what we want to do is focus armed police response in those areas and for those incidents where that's warranted. We've done a preliminary analysis, and it suggests that at least 20 to 25% of situations where we now send police don't require an armed response. And so that is some of the work that we're undertaking now, is finding other ways to respond those situations. So again, we can limit the use of armed police responses to those incidents that require an armed response. For example, those where there's a realistic possibility of imminent harm or where there's a threat of harm. Again, there are some, there are some situations where things are incredibly clear, and Vice President Sweet will talk more about them. But for example, if your laptop was stolen and the person who stole it isn't in the building, you don't need to have an armed police officer come in to take that response, have them walking through campus and et cetera to take that response. There's also responses where it's clear that you do need an armed police officer. Just a few weeks ago, we received a call that there was someone with a gun. As it turned out, it was not armed, but in one of our buildings that was off-site. And of course, in a situation like that, you do want an armed police officer there. But there's lots of situations where it's less clear and where we will continue to do more work. So for example, safety checks. When someone is concerned about the well-being of another person and Gillian from SafeCampus will talk more about the SafeCampus perspective there. And there are cases where we need a response by someone with special skills or training, but it's unclear whether an armed response is most appropriate. And we will continue to be working on those cases at the time. So right now, what we're doing is we're developing two ways to respond to those situations that clearly do not require an armed response. One is an online report, so that we need no in-person responder. So for example, if a laptop or a bicycle is stolen. And then there are other cases where we can send a person, but that's a non-armed response. For example, let's say that you didn't bring in your keys and you need to get into a building. Let's say there's a dent in your car, or in some cases, a mental health crisis, where we do need some level of expertise or support, but we don't necessarily need an armed responser. I've also been taking some part, and I've been spending some time talking to other university presidents. This is an issue that we are all grappling with. And so I've been engaging in them in an analysis of how other campuses are dealing with safety and policing, and how their organizations are structured. And I'm very much continuing to be engaged with them, seeing what we can learn from what other campuses are doing. And I'm also very much looking forward to more community feedback and engagement. And so if you have ideas, if you've heard from other campuses, if you've done some reading that I might not be aware of, if you have any ideas about ways that our campus can better address safety or concerns, and how we can develop alternatives to a police response, I very much encourage you to visit our town hall website, where you can fill out a web form where we're collecting feedback and recommendations and ideas. Very much look forward to what you have to say. Above all, I want to be clear that this is an ongoing process and discussion. We want that discussion to be as transparent and to be as clear and open to feedback as possible. So far, what we've done is we have addressed our call to action from the Black Student Union, and you can see my blog. And I urge you to please, be looking at my blog regularly and subscribe to it, because that is a good way to see how I'm responding to various issues on campus. And in that blog, I've published a full response on September 10th. In the week since then, I provided an update in my annual address. I've addressed the Faculty Senate meeting and the ASUW Senate Forum on this topic. I've also presented initial work to the Black Student Union, and I've offered to meet with other groups on campus as well, including meeting with the Decriminalized UW Coalition, that I've told them it's hard to know where the leadership there is, and I understand why that's the case. But I've asked them I've asked them actually on 3 different occasions to 3 different people who have emailed me saying that they represent UW Decriminalized, and told them that through some of their coalition groups like AAUP or UAW 4121, that I'm more than happy to meet with them as well. Also, I'm giving regular updates to the Regents' Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We just met with them a couple of days ago. I meet with them regularly, and I will be providing them with updates. I also will consistently provide updates to the campus community on my blog, which again, I encourage you to subscribe to. So now I'm going to hand it off to Vice President of Student Life, Denzil Sweet. As I mentioned, UWPD reports directly through him, to him, and through him to me. And he's going to share with you where we are on some of the issues like the online reporting tool and the development of safety responders. Denzil, handing off to you.
Thank you very much, President Cauce. I will try to keep my remarks brief so we can get to questions. However, I do want to provide some updates, as you mentioned, on a few points. First, a quick update on where we are now in terms of the online reporting tool we've been mentioning. As a reminder, we are planning to soon introduce a way for anyone in the campus community to make a police report without having to go to the police station or having to wait for an officer to show up. This, in part, addresses one of the concerns that has been raised about needing to have frequent contact with armed officers. So right now, the contract for this online reporting is currently under review in our purchasing department, and we actually are expecting approvals of all the language and terms very soon. It really will be an excellent way to file a report from anywhere at any time, day or night. I want to point out that we're not inventing this ourselves. In fact, it is in use by over 400 agencies across the country. They're currently using this tool, and it's also being implemented by 26 other agencies in the state of Washington. And you heard President Cauce say about the level of reduction. Based on their data, their experiences with this tool, they have seen a 25% or greater reduction in people having to interact in person with police officers. And President Cauce mentioned a little bit about what this tool will allow folks to do, but it will indeed, as she mentioned, allow folks to handle things such, say you had a minor fender bender and you don't need a police report. You found some property, you're the victim of fraud or theft. They can manage traffic flow or vandalism, bike and electronic registration, and a lot more. I think this tool will be especially helpful for individuals who simply need a police report for insurance filing purposes. We see this most when someone just needs to say, you know what, I left my iPhone at the bus stop or on the bus and it's gone. Somebody dinged my car here, whatever it is. They just need to file the report to get it, to turn it into the insurance department. And so that you don't now have to walk across campus, or you don't have to sit somewhere in your car or outside of a building waiting for a police officer to show up. I would say that besides the ease of filing these kinds of reports, there's another benefit to using this system. When you're the victim of a crime, in many respects, you lose control. This approach allows individuals to maintain control. You get to decide when you want to make a report, how much information you want to share, and with whom. So this tool, in some respects, gives back control to victims of crime. And one other additional good thing about this is that when you file this report, when you go online, the system will also direct you to the right agency. Sometimes people show up at UWPD and say, I want to file a report about somebody who threw a rock through my window, whatever it is. But the incident may have happened in Bellevue, but they're a member of our community, or it may have happened in Linwood or some other part of the area. Those reports actually technically have to be filed in the jurisdiction which they occurred. The good thing is that most of the surrounding agencies are using this online tool, so it doesn't require that you do double work. Once you start filling out the report, it'll say, oh, I see you indicated UWPD, but this report will actually be filed with Bellevue PD, and therefore it makes it a lot easier for you to figure out where you need to file a report. So we really do view this as a positive step as we continue, and I want to emphasize continue to evaluate how we will evolve policing practices on our campus. I also want to just say quickly in terms of the online safety responders that President Cauce mentioned. On this front, I think we're also making good progress. The positions are in fact posted, and we've actually already begun to do some preliminary interviews. You can actually, if you wanted to, just go on UW Jobs and simply search the word safety, and you'll see the positions pop right up. The main focus of these positions will be to supplement the work of our police officers with the use of unarmed safety responders to help increase safety on our campus. They'll be handling things such as calls for service, building lockouts, parking lot issues, bike theft reports, traffic management, break-ins, things like that. They'll also be providing security escorts. Say, I'm just not comfortable walking, across campus, and I happen to be here very late. The unarmed security responders can accompany you as you make that journey in and around campus. So you'll see these individuals, once we get them up and running, you'll see these individuals roaming around the center of campus. They'll also they serve as ambassadors. They'll be giving directions, they'll be answering questions, and essentially serving as a visible resource for the entire campus community and for our visitors. I do want to reemphasize a point that President Cauce made, which is that these individuals will not be responding to crimes in progress, things like sexual assaults or other emergencies, or reports of a person with a gun. I want people to understand you will still see, and we will have the services of our own UWPD to respond to crimes in progress and other life-threatening or emergency situations. Last thing I'll say on this is, once we've hired this first group, they will have to go through rigorous training. They'll have to go through training, background checks. They'll have to take a polygraph. There's a psychological evaluation and medical exams. The issue here is that these safety responders, they'll be interacting with individuals who are potentially in vulnerable states of mind, and they'll also have access to police reports. So this level of diligence on our part is necessary to protect our community and the general public. Lastly, I just want to say a quick word about the Student Safety Advisory Board. They've already started meeting. It's really a mechanism to facilitate UWPD sharing information and working in a collaborative manner with students from several representative student organizations. This includes the Associated Students, for those of you in campus, we only call them ASUW, Graduate and Professional Student Senate, the Office of Minority Affairs and Diversity Student Advisory Board, the Center for International Relations and Cultural Leadership Exchange, also known as CIRCLE, Fraternity and Sorority Governing Councils, and our Residential Student Community Association. These students help identify possible solutions to safety and security concerns. The chairperson of this group actually rotates annually among its members, and it is the students serving in this role who identify the time, place, and the agenda for meetings in collaboration with other students on the Safety Advisory Board. None of those things I just mentioned are set or governed by UWPD. UWPD does not set the agenda. They don't set the meeting time. They don't even tell them where they want them to meet. UWPD is simply a resource for this group, and the group will decide if and when and how long UWPD representatives will participate in any of the meetings. The students were not actually chosen by UWPD, but by the represented student organizations themselves. And this is our standard practice for these kinds of advisory groups. When we have them, we ask the key representative student organizations, we would like to have a representative, but we don't ever tell them, and it must be this person. They get to decide who they will send and the level of participation.
Yeah, and let me add to that, that Denzil and I have made it clear that we are happy to meet with them directly as well.
Correct. And with that brief overview, I will now turn it over to Gillian Wickwire, who will talk about our Safe Campus program and how we approach violence prevention and response on campus.
Thank you, Vice President Sweet. I'm so glad to be here today to speak with you all about the Safe Campus program. So Safe Campus is a violence prevention and response program that uses an evidence-based community awareness model of preventing violence. We rely on our community to notify us when they have safety concerns for themselves or others so that we can resolve or work to prevent future violence. The Safe Campus program serves all UW locations, including all faculty, staff, and students. Anyone affiliated with the university can use our resources. We have a 24/7 helpline that's staffed by our team of specialists with an after-hours option if the safety concerns are of an imminent nature. The types of calls we receive vary, but mostly we see calls around workplace violence, suicide concerns, other kinds of safety concerns happening in the learning or the work environment. And we also do central intake for the university's Title IX office, meaning we intake calls on sexual assault, relationship violence, stalking, and sexual harassment. 75% of the calls that we receive are from third-party callers, calling for someone else that they just have a concern for. I'm happy to also be able to dispel some misconceptions about the Safe Campus program. Safe Campus is not part of the University of Washington Police Department. We're also not part of public safety offices at Bothell, Tacoma, or the medical centers. We're an autonomous prevention unit that's located within human resources as we work on situations involving staff and faculty and students. We're also not an investigative office. Rather, we provide consultation and prevention. So people don't call us to make reports. They share concerns and we discuss potential next steps and develop individualized safety planning based on each situation. We also perform threat assessment to evaluate the risk level of situations, look for patterns. Again, we're trying to prevent violence from happening. Let me tell you a bit about the Safe Campus team, our training and expertise. So all members of the team have been trained in suicide intervention and crisis response work. Most of us were victim advocates in the past, working on gender-based violence issues with survivors. I am a certified threat manager, which is a certification through the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals. And there are about 130 of us in the country right now. So I lead the threat assessment on our team, though our team is all trained. And then finally, we also have, we've increased our cyber safety and digital security knowledge, given that we've been seeing more cyber harassment. We also, I'd like to just note that we also have a full-time preventionist developing and providing community-centered training. At Safe Campus, we all also have a deep commitment to increasing actual safety and feelings of safety for all members of our community. We work from a trauma-informed place, which means the work we do with callers hinges on what the caller or the impacted party would like to see happen. The specialists on the helpline provide compassionate consultation, discuss options and safety planning, and connect callers with the resources with which they are most comfortable. Callers can choose to remain anonymous. They can share only as much info as they would desire. In order to do effective violence prevention work, we also know that we must take into consideration the multiple identities of individuals in our community as violence is predicated on and acted out on those very identities. For example, we consider how a person's self-identified culture, sexual orientation, gender, race, immigration status, or ability may impact their experience with violence or threats of violence. Basically, we know there's no one-size-fits-all model for violence prevention, so we adapt our response to the needs of the individuals involved in any situation. We also think it's especially important to consider how marginalized populations are disproportionately impacted by violence and its aftermath. At Safe Campus, we have a strong belief a core value that, I'm sorry, that we work toward making sure that everyone feels that they have the safety that they need at the University of Washington. This particular moment within the Black Lives Matter movement offers us the opportunity to also re-examine policy, practice, and structure. A step in that direction is working with university leadership and UW service providers to explore some of the alternatives to armed police response for welfare checks. So when we say welfare checks, what do we mean by that? Everyone seems to have sort of a different idea of what that means. So when we talk about welfare checks, we're talking about someone going out to a residence to check on someone because there's immediate concern for harm or suicide. Usually that means it's a police officer, though on campus, and when we're working with residential life, a student that's living on campus, we're able to have a resident director go out and have that conversation so that we're not sending police out to the residents. The vast majority of suicide concern calls that do come into SafeCampus, though, do not warrant a welfare check. I think that might be a misconception as well. So in 2019, we looked at the data for that year. We had 141 suicide concerns calls out of nearly 1,400 calls total. In only 13 of those 141 calls did SafeCampus request a welfare check. That's 9%. We also employ police welfare checks as a last resort because we know that sending police officers to someone's door to check on them may not feel like a caring outreach from the university, and it can feel unsafe amongst our communities of color. So what we are doing now is I've been working alongside student life leaders as well as the executive office with some of our faculty experts on non-police response to welfare checks in crisis situations. That group's been convening to discuss this very issue. How do we find a way to send someone out to a residence to make sure someone's safe without having that person be an armed police officer? We're also beginning to work with direct service providers on campus to explore options and do research. We know how important it is that perspective and voices of marginalized populations are a central part of these conversations about the re-envisioning and bolstering of practices and protocols. And finally, in terms of SafeCampus, we are currently assessing how we can better serve all university populations in our daily practices. We know we can always be doing better, so we're open to any feedback you have. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you to all our panelists. We will now address some of the questions that have been sent in by the campus community, and we'll begin with those topics that have generated the most inquiries. President Cauce, I will start with you. I know you frequently heard from people who want to understand whether the UW can spend more money on mental health by spending less money on policing. How would you respond to those questions?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I want to say that it's a little bit different when you look at things from the perspective of a city and when you look at things from the perspective of a university campus like ours. There is no question that from the perspective of a city, investing more money in social services and mental health does decrease the use of police, sometimes short-term, sometimes more long-term. My advisor, who was one of the founders of Head Start and the key evaluator, found that over time, kids who had participated in Head Start were much less likely to actually, commit crimes and so therefore to require the involvement of police. My own research has found that in terms of adolescents, particularly low income and BIPOC adolescents who have mental health problems often get their first contact with mental health providers through jail. So there's no question that there's a link there. However, on a university campus like ours, it's not typically that the kinds of crimes that we see are related to the mental health issues of our students. So there's not that same kind of direct correlation. Having said that, I want to be very clear that we have heard loud and clear from BSU, from ASUW, from PACS, that we need to invest more in mental health services, and we are doing just that. As Vice President Sweet has talked about, and as many of you got an email about this just recently, all the data nationally tends to suggest that all of us, but particularly young people, are experiencing heightened levels of anxiety, depression, certainly not being able to be with each other in classes and in social activities has only made those issues, more pronounced. And we can and we will be investing more in mental health and in mental health resources. No question about that.
Great, thank you. I'd like to stay with you, President Cauce. As you've noted, the UW Black Student Union has issued a list of demands, several of which are related to policing and campus safety. More than 24 people sent in those demands during the lead up to this town hall. One of the demands is for the university to cut ties with the Seattle Police Department, including not using SPD for additional event security, not using SPD in on-campus responses, and refusing to hand over people detained by University of Washington Police to Seattle Police. How have you or how do you plan to respond to and address these demands, specifically in this instance with regards to Seattle Police, and under what circumstances do involve SPD on campus?
Okay, I talked about that a little bit in my opening comments. I want to repeat, we have no contracts with SPD, and we have no intention of entering into any contracts with SPD. We don't use them for security at football games. I know that sometimes people say, yeah, but I see officers, outside of football games. Yes, they're there. SPD is there to deal with traffic management because the streets belong to the city and are, and that kind of traffic is dealt with SPD. But in terms of inside the stadium and, for, basically events, we do not use SPD, and we have no intention of doing that. As I said, we do have some agreements related to north of 45th, and also in terms of some areas of the U District where we have some of our buildings and where we have some of our staff and students located, et cetera. We do have an agreement, but that agreement is largely one that allows UWPD to take the lead and to very much work with those kinds of situations. So I want to make that very clear. Now, of course, we have an open campus. As a public university, anybody can walk into the open spaces on our campus. And so SPD officers have the right to come into those outdoor areas just like anybody else does. But they, unless there is some kind of very imminent situation of harm, they don't enter our buildings or our residence halls without, prior permission.
Excellent, thank you. Vice President Sweet, staying with the topic of the demands, these demands issued by the Black Student Union also include a call to disarm UWPD and ban the use of police dogs by the police department in light of the historical use of dogs to intimidate Black people. How have you or how will you address this demand?
Thanks for the question. We're indeed committed to addressing that concern. Let me start by saying that I think most people are not aware that there are actually different kinds of police dogs. There are canines that are used for crowd control or to pursue and detain suspects. Typically, you'll see German Shepherds doing that kind of work. There are also cadaver dogs that help find deceased individuals. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are explosive detecting dogs. These are explosive detection dogs. They're the only type that UWPD currently employs. We have no dogs that are capable or, quite frankly, interested in pursuing suspects or that even have the ability to assist in crowd control. In fact, our dogs are mainly Labrador retrievers, and they're trained to detect explosives, as I mentioned, and they're very people friendly. We use these dogs only to help ensure the safety of large events while reducing the need to search individuals as they enter the events. So they'll walk through the stadium before football games, hecked before basketball games, and other large venues. Now, all that said, we do understand and we acknowledge that for some people, any kind of police dog can create some level of discomfort. So we've taken steps to limit the presence of our explosive detection dogs on our main campus, except when we need them for these kind of large venues. Some departments have actually used to ask us to bring the dogs by to visit because they were so friendly, but we do not want to do that and then simultaneously make other people uncomfortable. And so because of this and because of the concerns that have been raised, we are in fact limiting, and you will see a reduced presence of the explosive detection dogs on campus, except in the instances that I mentioned.
All right. Thank you. I'd like to stay with you, Vice President Sweet. A number of people wrote in about specific buildings or areas in which they work that they say are experiencing increasing incidents of vandalism and theft, as well as unsafe interactions with people that the questioners believed were experiencing mental health or substance abuse issues. A number of people also wrote in about increased reports of people camping in university buildings. Can you talk about the plans to make improvements in these kinds of basic personal safety and property protection issues?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. You know, with less density on campus, this is an understandable concern. You know, I think it's especially so for some of our custodial staff who come in very early in the morning. You can imagine that it's a bit disconcerting to find individuals camping out or roaming buildings when you arrive and you're the only individual that's supposed to be in the building. To address this, we have implemented a program whereby we have unarmed security personnel walking through each of the buildings 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are also securing the buildings after these walkthroughs and working with our facility staff to address any vulnerabilities that we may find in windows or other entrances. Since March, we've actually conducted 15,000 building checks. That's since the start of the pandemic. And we'll continue to do that throughout the time of this less reduced density on campus. You know, I'll also add that one of the additional benefits of these safety checks is that we have actually found things like water leaking in the buildings or spills or other maintenance issues that need to be addressed. I'll stop and say that if anyone has a specific concern about their particular building, I ask that you please contact UWPD directly. They'll be able to meet with you and make an assessment of your individual situation in your individual building.
Thank you. This one probably is for both President Cauce and Vice President Sweet. The Black Student Union's demands also call for expanding funding for mental health resources for UW students and cite long waiting periods to talk to a therapist, the lack of affordable mental health services, and the lack of Black therapists available through the UW. How are you addressing these demands? And President Cauce, I'll start with you.
Okay, again, you know, I mentioned this, briefly, earlier. There is no question that beefing up our mental health resources, shrinking, any time that, waiting lists, all of that is an absolute top priority, including making sure that our mental health providers can speak multiple languages and that they are culturally competent. I actually did some work, as many of you know, I am a clinical psychologist by training, and I actually did some work on cultural competence. And it is absolutely very important. So we understand that these are all priorities. Provost Mark Richards is also very aware of these issues, and he's working on finding more funding streams to help fund more mental health services. Again, there's always room for improvement. We can do better, but this is absolutely a priority for our students and a priority for us I want to be clear, mental health is health, and it is absolutely critical. I'm very concerned in particular about the winter months. During the winter months, we do get less vitamin D, we do get less sunshine. This particular winter may be particularly rough. People who were able to congregate and be able to have more interactions outdoors, that will become not entirely impossible, but a little bit more difficult. And so we really do need to consider more ways to bolster mental health. And we do have a number of resources. I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Sweet. Many of you got an announcement just this week about new services that are coming online. Want to talk about them?
Yeah, but I would also add, especially for the students on this webinar, you should look at the UW Recreation site for some online exercise classes, some yoga, mindfulness. You could even do remote intramurals. So there are plenty of ways in which you can remain active even in the winter months, which we know is important to mental health. So, and additionally,
reduce your screen time a little bit. That's good for mental health too.
Additionally, for all of you students who opened my recent email, which should be everybody, you saw the exciting announcement about that UW is launching a new mental health support offering called My SSP, My Student Support, to provide students with access to real-time, confidential mental health and crisis intervention support. Now, the beauty of this is that this is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Students will no longer have to wait for the counseling center to open or figure out what they'll do on a weekend or during the holidays. This also has the capacity to handle a large volume of calls and will help reduce the wait time. It's also available in multiple languages and can be accessed from anywhere students are studying remotely. I want to point out that this represents a new investment in mental health on the part of the UW, but it does not replace what we have already been doing. The full slate of counseling center and whole health mental health services also remain available to all students. And I know part of the question was having that be affordable. No student has to pay to get counseling and mental health services at this university, including for the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week access I just mentioned. Additionally, all of these counselors are deeply committed to ensuring culturally sensitive practices and have made public statements to that effect on the Counseling Center blog site. I want to emphasize that this is just one more tool in our ever expanding approach. It is not the end all, be all. We don't feel like we have arrived, and we will continue to make progress on this front. But we do believe the addition of this new resource is a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Ms. Wickwire, I'd like to bring you in here now on a similar topic. You spoke earlier about welfare checks. When someone is clearly exhibiting indications that they may harm themselves, when should a person call the police versus calling SafeCampus? And what happens after a call is made to SafeCampus?
Sure, thanks for that question. I think that if somebody believes that someone is in the act of harming themselves right now, then that would be a call to the police. But overall, we recommend contacting SafeCampus as soon as you have any concerns for someone else. It provides the opportunity for us as professionals to evaluate the concerning behaviors, go over all of the various options for potential next steps, and ideally intervene at a lower level than a welfare check. So when someone calls SafeCampus, they'll speak to one of our trained professionals. That person will listen empathetically, ask questions about what your concerns are, trying to gather enough information in order to evaluate the risk level and whether there is concern for imminent violence. Then Safe Campus is going to go ahead and contact our partners either in student life or human resources, depending on whether we're dealing with an employee or student, to see if they have any additional information that, again, increases our concern or decreases it. There might be some risk mitigators that we know about that are in place, but we sort of need to connect the dots, which is one of the reasons for calling Safe Campus, is to make sure that if multiple people have called about one person because they're all concerned, that would heighten my concern level. And it might mean that we want to try to intervene right now rather than intervene in a couple of days. Other things that the conversation will help us with is determining what the possible next steps are. So I think it's just helpful for folks to know that, again, welfare check is the last resort step, but there's a lot of steps that lead up to that that are options. So we might coach you, the caller, on having a conversation or offering resources with the person in question. If you're not comfortable with that, we might find a different person that is somehow tied to the person. So a faculty advisor, a friend who's also employed by UW, or one of our offices to do an outreach and have a conversation. Again, the goal is to get resources to the person we're concerned about. Safe Campus has also started doing what we just call safety check-ins, which basically, when COVID hit, we started seeing more and more individuals in our community become unresponsive. So we get a lot of calls now that we document as somebody's just unresponsive. They're not necessarily missing, they're just not showing up to the Zoom sessions for class or work. Maybe they're not responding to people who are reaching out to them. That doesn't necessitate that they need to have a welfare check done and have police sent to their home. Instead, we just want to see if we can get them to respond to us first. And then, we can then offer all of the resources available to them and get them connected. We found that to be a really successful strategy so far. We're hoping to continue doing that. And then we also have the option, of course, of contacting someone's emergency contact. And I would just say right now that if you haven't updated your emergency contact since you started at the university or you became a student, you might want to look into doing that. Often we find that people, when they put down who their emergency contact would be, they're considering a person that might be notified that there was an earthquake in Seattle or something like that, not someone that would be contacted to say, we're worried about someone in your life's mental well-being. So make sure the right person is really written down for us so that we're not contacting either someone that is an unwanted or someone that you wouldn't want contacted, or someone who possibly could be abusive at this point. So that's always a concern. And then finally, the police welfare check, like I said, is the last resort. It really is for when we think that there's imminent danger right now. So if our community, though, is able to notice the warning signs as they go along, is able to look out for each other, check in with each other, if you notice that somebody is struggling, let someone know. You can call Safe Campus, you can speak to us anonymously, you can share your concerns. You can also just call to brainstorm us about the situation. And in doing so, it may be that you discover that there's something more you can do that you feel comfortable with. That's really what's important.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Sweet, other questions we received were regarding UW alerts and noted that these alerts sometimes include a suspect's, quote, dark complexion, unquote, as part of the description, while others do not include a skin tone descriptor. Who decides what information is included in an alert, and what systems are in place to mitigate the impact of implicit bias?
Thank you. We're committed to getting this one right. The UW Crisis Communication Team, that's the group that manages these messages. This group includes UWPD as well as representatives from UW Communications, Housing, Facilities, Emergency Management, Information Technology, and other areas. every time this group sends a message, it gets together to review the decisions made, including the content of the message and any feedback that comes in from the community via Facebook, Twitter, or email. We constantly evaluate the effectiveness and the relevance of the information we include. And we are also well aware that there are certainly some studies out there and anecdotal evidence that question the usefulness and the reliability, even the accuracy of race-based subject descriptions. We also understand that these descriptions can cause more harm by reinforcing negative stereotypes and prejudices. You know, it's actually based on previous feedback that we've eliminated the use of the individual, a Black individual or a Latino individual or any such identifiers in these alerts. You know, we did that because it's just not always possible for someone to know the race or ethnicity of an individual simply by looking at them. You know, our goal is to only use race-based or skin color description if they are deemed to be accurate, reliable, and vital for the purposes of notifying the community to potential threats to their safety. So we'll continue to evaluate the usefulness of these descriptors in our UW alert messages and in our notifications of criminal incidents. And I assure you, we will continue to make adjustments based on the feedback and the usefulness of these messages.
Thank you. Vice President Sweet, we did have several people also write in to ask why the UW Chief of Police was not included in this town hall panel. I understand that the police chief reports to you, but what role does UWPD's leadership have in these discussions and changes?
So yes, UWPD plays a vital role in these changes. Early on in the discussions we were having, we offered to have UWPD interact directly with individuals asking for change. The strong feedback that we got was that they felt uncomfortable discussing their concerns directly with the police. That is why we're holding this forum, so that everyone can understand how seriously we take the concerns raised and learn what the administration of the university is doing in response. Nevertheless, UWPD is firmly committed to being strong partners in ensuring socially just and responsible policing. They're currently engaging in robust bias and diversity training, and are also engaging in anti-racism and de-escalation training. As part of their accreditation, they are independently reviewed for bias in their policing, disproportional impact, and how they're engaging in dealing with non-policing situations. They have publicly shared their values and commitments to being fair and transparent in their social media platform and on their website. And you'll see weekly posts about this on their social media. The last thing I'll say is that their community engagement and outreach also continues in a robust fashion. Anyone can interact directly with UWPD through a variety of their online forums. They have one called Coffee with a Cop, and there's another one. They have a brown bag series that tackles specific incidents or issues. A recent one of these had over 50 participants. There was one of these on Wednesday, I believe, and the next one scheduled for November 5th. So this is a great way for individuals to interact and hear directly from UWPD about the issues they care about.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and we're going to talk about cameras. We've received a number of questions about the use of cameras, both why the university doesn't use more cameras in places such as outside residence halls, and also concerns that the university would use more cameras. President Cauce or Vice President Sweet, how would you like to address the topic of cameras?
Yeah, let me begin, and then I'll hand it over to Vice President Sweet. I did, raise as I said, I've been, talking to other university presidents, looking at other university models, and we do use cameras in public spaces less than many of our peers. And I, did bring that up, that perhaps that was something that we needed to look at more carefully. The response was overwhelmingly one of, that is not something that we want on this campus. So I want to be 100% clear. That is not something that we are looking at doing, at least in the foreseeable and the short-term future. We may have more discussions about that at some point, but that is absolutely not something. We are not looking to put cameras in public spots and places at this time. I will let Vice President Sweet talk about them in the residence halls.
Yeah, I will also emphasize that the point, we are not expanding any cameras. There are lots of cameras in different buildings and other areas. The thought at one point was, should we expand this to place more, such as in front of the Hub or Mary Gates Hall or the Quad, and President Cauce has been clear. At this point, we're following these other policing priorities, not that additional cameras on campus. I will also just mention that every one of the residences does have at the entrance of the building security cameras. Those security cameras are not in fact monitored, but the footage can be reviewed retroactively for up to 30 days should an incident take place. We certainly don't have cameras in any of the kind of more apartment style facilities where every one of the apartments has an external entrance, but we do have some limited use of cameras already in existence.
One more thing I'd like to mention before closing, from my work looking at other campuses and other universities, and that's that basically there are two different models of policing and campus safety, two large. One is that the university itself, and this is usually the model of most private universities, does not have its own police force, but in those cases, they contract out with the city police. So for example, people have talked about how Portland State has disarmed their police. Yes, that's true, but they have developed contracts with the city of Portland Police, which actually has its headquarters 2 blocks away from campus for policing. The other model, which is the one that we use, is having our own police force, but there is no university, no college in this country, may be different in countries that have gun control, but there are no colleges and no campuses that I am aware of in this country that neither have contracts with their local police department or have their own armed police force.
Thank you, President Cauce. That is all the time we have today. If you missed part of the broadcast, you can see a replay at uw.edu/president/townhall. That's also where you'll find a web form where you can provide feedback or suggestions for the university on topics related to safety and policing.
And please, we are very, very committed to reimagining how we do campus safety and policing, including looking at how we organize ourselves. And any thoughts, suggestions, and ideas will be taken very, very seriously, and we'll keep this conversation going.
I'd like to thank all of our panelists and to all of you for watching, especially those of you who submitted a question. Please stay safe and go Huskies.